LGBTQIA+.
If you have always identified with a gender from birth, you never understand the feeling that comes with it, and you don't quite get it.
One day I'll feel very masculine, and one day I'll feel very feminine, and I'll just take it from there.
If you're a stranger or we've just met, don't ask me about my genitals. Basic rule.
It is mostly kind of phobia through ignorance rather than through pure hatred.
I'm Anne-Marie McCormack, and this podcast is about gender. I think it's very confusing now because there seems to be so many terms. When I was growing up, you just knew where you stood. Give me a couple of the terms that are currently out there about gender and what they mean.
I mean, do you want us to tell you the terms that we apply to ourselves?
If I throw some terms at you and you tell me what you think they mean. Okay, transgender.
Well, transgender just means that your gender that you most align yourself with isn't the same as the gender you were assigned according to your sex at birth.
Yeah, it's a performance artist that I follow, Travis Albanza, who's been in the news a lot lately. They described it as the doctor looks at what's between your legs at birth and goes, that's what you are. And then a few years later you go, no.
Transgender is a very broad term for just not being what you've told you you are.
Okay, so pangender, what does that mean?
Pangender means...
pan means all gender. It's someone who's like, I just want to be everything, I guess. But I don't know.
Something you need to understand about being non-binary or non-gender conforming is that there are a lot of terms that fall under that bracket that mean similar things but are just more accurately assigned to certain feelings. So they're not really that important in terms of like to understand them because they're more for personal use.
Oh, so is there a difference now in terms of whether it's a gender thing or a sexuality thing?
I would say that sexuality and gender are completely different things.
Definitely.
The best way we had it described as was sexuality is who you go to bed with, but gender is who you go to bed as.
They're not connected in like almost any sense.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah, definitely.
So to give an example, like not to offend anyone or bring anyone to it, but some people associate transgender women as being gay. That's the association that they make automatically, which is not true. You can be a transgender woman and be attracted to anyone. They're not connected whatsoever.
Being a transgender person doesn't affect whether or not you're homosexual. It just affects the label that you use. You're born being attracted to a certain type of people, and you're born being a certain person, and those terms change depending on your understanding of it.
Yeah, obviously, like before I transitioned, I was a female in brackets, but I was attracted to men, and I've transitioned now knowing that I'm a guy, I'm a male, and I live as a gay man. That's what I am. I'm attracted to men predominantly. So I term myself as gay or occasionally pansexual if someone else comes along that I'm like, yeah, maybe I would. But it's entirely a gender is who I am, sexuality is who I want to be with thing. It's not a connection at all, really. It's, yeah.
So, F to M, what does that mean?
Female to male.
That's me. Hey.
And M to F, obviously, is
Male to female.
F to X.
That's me.
That's me.
What's F to X?
M to X.
Right, you say F
So
to X.
F to X is I was born female, but I assign myself as non-binary or non-gendered. So X means not male or female.
Okay, and you?
I'm exactly the same, but male to X.
Right, okay. The term transvestite, I'm going to
That's
you.
a little bit. It's not a term that I like because it's usually associated with quite a sexual aspect. Most people associate like transgender people as transvestites, which is not the same thing, and they sometimes paired together, which is not really. Mm-hmm. Would you say it's not?
Yeah, I think the thing I saw for it was that transvestite is someone who dresses in the clothes of the opposite gender for sexual pleasure, or for personal pleasure, whereas transgender is this is the person you are. There's not
the suffix vestite means that there's some sort of sexual payoff. It's not about identity, and it's more about fetish. So it's not a term that people like really in the trans community, because it means that people are expecting that you fetishize like who you are.
Because my understanding of it was always that it was a male who liked dressing as a woman but was not gay, who still, I've met quite a few transvestites who were married and still had a, sexual relationship with their wife. So I haven't met so many females who dress as men, but I never realised there was this fetishization, if there is such a word.
Well, usually when people would dress in clothes that are traditionally considered for the opposite sex, you'd call that cross-dressing. Cross-dressers is what you would usually term. The term transvestite, or like drag or cross-dressing are the more accepted terms. Transvestite, it doesn't really have anything to do with sexuality, and it definitely doesn't have anything to do with being trans.
Yeah, the thing I get a lot when I'm walking down the street is yes queen, yes slay, which is normally associated with drag queens. And I'm like, I mean, thank you very much, but I'm not a drag queen. I don't perform for money. Well, I don't perform for money. To clarify.
So you, of all people, have accepted that there's a range of terms. Now, do you get confused yourselves?
I do sometimes, but I'm slightly older than you guys, and I transitioned kind of when I was quite young, so I've always just been like, oh, like I'm trans, I'm on the side of this community, but it's not like the biggest thing about myself. But I try and learn, I try and keep up with like the new kids and what a lot of them are saying, because I feel that like maybe one day a term will come along that fits me better than what I think I know I am. But I think it's just one of those things that once you're in what's termed as the queer community, you see these terms come up a lot and your friends identify with them and you just kind of learn that way. But sometimes
so do you think you're just gathering them because suddenly it becomes popular, and do you think social media has had a part in this?
I think social media has a huge part in making people more confident, and also making people more aware. I knew that being trans was a thing my whole life, because I grew up in a very open-minded city, but I knew I wasn't a boy. And it wasn't until I met someone who was non-binary and like went on the internet and looked up what it was and read it and was like, yeah, that's me. And like was like, oh, okay, cool. If I didn't have the internet, I still wouldn't know.
And that was with me. I've spent the last year and a half basically trying to figure out who I am as a gender, because it is really confusing. And then when I met Kai, they were kind of like, well, I mean, you're not just a boy or a girl. And you're also not just gender fluid. Like there's all these in-betweens, and sort of you put together your own gender identity by how you feel. And that's, at the end of the day, it's about being comfortable in how you identify.
Were you confused before anyway?
Growing up, I was always a tomboy. And I never really felt comfortable being a girl, or not even so much as being a girly girl, but being, with all the girls. I felt more comfortable being with all the guys. But I was happy. It's really hard to explain, isn't it? I was happy being called a girl, but it itched under my skin, I guess. It's hard to say.
I would imagine, like, for George, like, because I would imagine, like, when you were younger, any association with being a girl was completely uncomfortable.
I was such a textbook case. Like, they said that at the gender clinic. They were just like, you literally have the textbook story. And I was like, yep, that's me.
Yeah.
So obviously I come at it from a completely different angle. I've just gone from female to male straight over. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I think it's kind of weird because, like, obviously I'm not about to be like, you can't use that term, it's not real and made up. But there's such a, like, I can understand that from an outsider's perspective, coming in, being like, what the heck does that mean?
I think people need to understand as well, like...
Yeah, I'd say there's basics that people need to understand from an outside perspective, and that's that, like, there's male, there's female, and you can have in between. And a lot of people can just use the term non-binary to be in between, meaning not in the two binary set, like genders or sexes or whatever you want to call it.
It doesn't really matter. Like when I introduce myself to people and they don't know much about gender, I don't really care that they don't know. I just want them to respect what I've said to them. Like, I don't care if you don't know what non-binary is, but if I tell you to call me by a certain name, just call me by a certain name. It's common decency.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't really talk about it because there's no need for people to change my pronouns. I prefer to go by M, but that's just my shortened name, you know?
So do you think you are more confused now or less confused by the fact that there is so many options?
Less confused.
What about you two?
I personally would say more. Only because as I grew up, I didn't I knew that I didn't want to be a female, so I didn't fit in the transgender category. And I knew I didn't want to be, like, male all the time, so I didn't understand where I was in the situation, so I wasn't fitting in that aspect of it or that aspect of it, so I was somewhere in between. And then I realised it wasn't about being male or female, it was about how I wanted to present myself in general and how I wanted to feel confident in what I was doing. Nothing to do with gender at all. It was more of an art for me, an expression, I guess.
It was more about perception than inner feelings for you.
Yeah. And I think for me, because I'm so solid in who I am, it's not really confusion. It's just a kind of like, yeah, you do you. Like, live your best selves. If those terms apply to you, go for it. It's none of my business. Like,
as a gender fluid person, every day is a confusing mess. Every day I wake up and know myself less than before.
Hey, well, okay. I think, is there any terms that you just fire them at me? Name all the terms that are out there at the moment. Just shoot, all of you, whatever comes into your head.
I would say the most used terms in terms of like non-binary, because I know a lot of non-binary people, are gender fluid, pangender, agender, demigender, bigender. Those are pretty much the main ones. And
any to add?
Genderqueer.
I'd say those are the main ones. There's also like the really niche dark depths of Tumblr ones.
And demi-boy and demi-girl.
Yeah. Could someone explain that to me, actually, because I've not heard demi.
Hello.
Hello.
My time to shine. It's so you've got your assigned gender at birth, which we're all very familiar with, and you're not fully gender fluid. You don't wake up confused as to who you are one day or the next, but you're also not distinctly girl, but you're definitely not, well, for me, being demigirl, you're not distinctly girl, but you're not also a guy by any stretch of the imagination.
Demi-boy and demi-girl is saying, I mostly identify as a boy, but not completely.
Yeah.
Or I mostly identify as a girl, but not completely. And it usually, at least most people I've met, it's more of a term that they use personally.
Yeah.
It doesn't change their pronouns, and it's not usually something they talk about. It's just something that they know within themselves.
So,
yes.
So you're saying you're demigirl.
Yes.
Does lesbian come into this at all?
No.
Now, is that offensive for me to ask you?
No.
Because, like when I was younger, you would see what would typically be quite a male-looking female who was saying, I'm lesbian and I'm into being with women. So that was very clear, very easy. Like you'd see a male gay who said, I'm gay, but he might be quite feminine in his outward expression. So where are gay and lesbian now?
So...
Lesbian.
Well, I'd like you to answer.
As far as sort of butch-looking females, etc., I mean, I've done both. I've done the really pretty girl, Cosmo girl type of thing, and I've also done the completely binds chest, dresses as a guy, and Kai will say to me, "You look like a butch lesbian today, and you're rocking it." I
get that as well from friends. Great, thanks.
Thanks. I don't want to say it, but it's almost like a stereotype of gender and sexuality that women will look butch if they're attracted to women, and men will look a bit femme. Nowadays, there are all these different terms for people who, the way they express their gender and sexuality. So you'll have femme lesbians and you'll have the butch lesbians, and they will identify as
lipstick lesbian.
Yeah, lipstick lesbian. Sorry, thank you, darling. And that's all up to who you are as a person. But again, that has no bearing on your sexuality at all. I could just as easily turn around dressed in my lovely flannel like I am today and say I'm straight as a pole.
Yeah.
I think it also comes down to that idea of gender expression versus identity.
Yes.
Like, I always know that I'm pretty much male, but some days I describe myself as quite soft. Like, I'm like a poetry flower loving, floral wearing. It depends on what you want to show yourself outwardly to the world as and what you are. That's quite interesting. Because it's like, my best friend Kasha, who couldn't be here today, she is a butch lesbian. Like, she's butcher than I am. Like, she could take me in a fight. And but she still identifies as a woman mostly, and she is attracted to women, but she's still like, yeah, I'm mostly female. That's what I am. Like, I am girl. I just don't dress like it. And it's down to that, like, your expression of who you are and how you dress, and how that doesn't define what you identify as. Like, I know so many like cis guys, which is same gender as they were assigned at birth, who are beautiful and express themselves like, absolutely not just me being like gay lost, but like beautiful men, and they all like, and some of them will wear like skirts and dresses and all that stuff, but they're still like, no, I'm a dude. It's like Kurt Cobain and all that. He wore dresses his whole life, but it's still like, I'm a guy. Like, also goes down to what really, like, why are we assigning clothes genders?
So is it, I mean, looking around at you, Connor, you definitely come out, you win the prize for the most creative dresser this morning. So is it, oh, sorry, Kai.
Okay.
And like, you've got students out of bed at like 9 in the morning.
I know.
You can't expect wonders.
Well, your hair is always very creative, let's face it. Every week it's a different colour. Is it a creative expression for you as well,
Absolutely,
do you think?
Yeah. Whether it's male or female, or whatever I want to present as.
So some days you dress as a male and some days as a female. So what determines that?
It's day to day. I could wake up in one morning and think, oh, I mean, I'm never going to be extremely masculine because I'm a tiny little blonde, like, male associated boy. But one day I'll feel very masculine, blah, 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 blah. And one day I'll feel very feminine, and I'll just take it from there.
Okay.
I think it's so hard for most cisgender people to understand feelings of dysphoria and like a feeling, an awareness of your gender. Like, I'll always say to people, it's like, I'm having a boy day today, and they'll be like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I woke up and I was like, boy. And they're like, I don't understand. Or like, whenever I'll wear femme clothes, like I'll wear dresses or skirts, and everyone will be like, you're having a girly day? And I'm like, no, masculine. I just wanted to wear a skirt today. Is that okay with you?
No, but we will get a group text saying, guys, Kai's wearing a dress. Get into town now.
So, what offends you? What terms offend you?
Oh, we're about to be like,
yeah.
Whoever's hearing this is probably like, millennial snowflakes.
Well, I'm talking about purely gender here.
I think, like, obviously it's not really a term that's ever used to talk to me because it's always used to derogatise transgender women, but the term tranny, it's just like, shut up. Like, that's just an instant, please stop.
Can I ask if someone is transgender and they use that
if
word...
they reclaim it, like, it's our word to reclaim, go for it.
Do you
it's
feel
your
that
word.
that's...
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I feel like it's quite empowering.
When it's hurled at you in the street, it's just like...
Yeah, it depends how someone says it.
Yeah.
On that note, when people use... Sorry to say this, but when people use the word faggot to describe anyone who's, like, not an ideal image of what they are, or someone who's different to what they, you know.
We just say the F word in our house, don't we?
Yeah, I can't say that word without like having a visceral reaction.
People have been saying it around me all my life, so it's to take it back, it feels quite powerful.
And actually, the word queer has been now re-embraced because, again,
stole that one back.
This was always a term that was considered quite derogatory and nasty to say to people. So is that okay now?
Well, I mean, if you come at me and be like, what's up, you queero, then I'm going to be offended, even if I have reclaimed the word, because it's about intention. The word queer is a really beautiful word that has a really beautiful meaning, which is why the community was like, we want that one.
Yeah, I think it's because like the term queer tends to describe everything that's outside of the sexual gender art, like mainstream norm. It's all that weird. An umbrella term. It's all the beautiful weird queer art and politics and literature and everything that we get from it. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm in, that's what I am, so I'll use it for myself. But I think if someone like came at me in the street and was like, oh, are you queer and all that stuff, I'll be like, no.
Because that word, if you think about it, queer means odd, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it meant weird. I literally thought it meant something just slightly off, and I thought it was a beautiful word to describe it.
It's a beautiful word.
Just vocally, just saying the word queer is very pleasing to say. And I just thought it meant a bit odd, and then I found out it was this umbrella term, and I was like, fair.
Yeah, I think what you said, Kai, about intention, it's entirely about what people intend for it to mean, and you can tell a lot by inflection. Like, some people say stuff to me, and it's out of a genuine place of curiosity, and I'm a bit like, okay, bit offish, but that's fine, you're just asking me this because you want to learn. Whereas other people, you can always tell when someone intends to offend or hurt you.
Yeah.
And it's that I'm never offended by a lot of stuff. I don't get offended easily. I have no realms in which to get offended easily. Like I'm just like, cool, whatever. Shrug,
the only thing that, regardless of intention, will always make me slightly irritated is when people will inquire about my physical biology or whether or not I'm going to change it.
Oh, no,
have you had the op yet?
Which one?
Why do you need to know that?
Also, why is it any of your business? If you're a stranger or we've just met, don't ask me about my genitals. Basic rule.
Or buy me a drink
to anyone.
Unless you want to see them. Unless you want to see them for flirtatious reasons, don't ask me. The only reason.
Yeah. The only reason would be like, do I need to go on birth control?
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's
okay, so LGBT.
Let's
start again. LGBTQ plus.
LGBTQIA plus.
Oh my goodness, God. You've added a new
lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual plus.
Or agender sometimes.
No, it's asexual.
I just tend to term it the gays.
Or just queer, which is a lot easier.
And then the plus.
The plus is, if you want to see the full acronym,
it's
26 letters.
It's the alphabet.
It's pretty much.
Some repeated letters, though.
Yeah, there's some repeated letters. But the main acronym before the plus covers the main basis. Like, all the other ones can fall under those ones, which is why they're the main ones.
Okay. So when you enter the community...
I mean, it's not like
do people instruct each other? Because, Connor, you sound like you don't know all these terms. You're learning.
I've had to talk to a lot of people to try and find out where I am placed in this, in it all. Do you know, like...
And do you feel you have to be placed within?
You don't have to. You don't even have to label yourself whatsoever. You can just be yourself.
Being non-binary in a place where there are lots of other people questioning their gender is so easy because people don't care about labels and it's very much about come as you are.
But there is a massive issue with transphobia in the LGB sexuality side of it.
And
I
biphobia.
think, exactly. And I honestly think it's because if you have always identified with a gender from birth, you never understand the feeling that comes with it and you don't quite get it. But I find that in the queer community there is an issue with it, but it's transphobia of ignorance, never of pure hatred, apart from like the Republican gays on Twitter who are like, we don't want the tea anymore, and it's like, well, tough shit, we're still here. But
I think, to be honest, I think we've covered most of what we need to cover as a group. What I'd like to do now is sort of get more into your own story.